Lewis here with Pickleball Pursuit, and today we'll be taking a look at a very controversial release, the Joola Gen 3 paddles. With the release of the Gearbox Power Pro Elongated, the question really has arisen at, are these paddles too powerful? And the Gen 3 paddles from Joola are no exception from this controversy. Before getting too far into this, I wanted to say that this paddle is not nearly as powerful as the Gearbox Power Pro Elongated. Now, it is definitely a very powerful and poppy paddle and does have similar characteristics, but the absolute power potential of these Joola paddles is not nearly as high as the Gearbox Power Pro Elongated. With that being said, these are definitely a very challenging paddle to play with. Now, I would say they're definitely geared towards the 4.0, maybe even 4.5 and above. However, I do think that they do offer plenty of playing qualities that will be very enticing to many players. The first being, this paddle has extremely high spin potential, some of the best on the market. And that's due to two reasons. The first being that all of these Joola Gen 3 paddles have very rough grit texture, which is going to add more spin on the ball. The second being dwell time. These Joola Gen 3 paddles have the highest dwell time of any paddles that I have tested. And dwell time, really, just to give you a quick insight, is just how long the pickleball stays on the paddle whenever you are hitting a stroke. Another important aspect about these paddles that is definitely going to be very intriguing to many players is just how much power you can generate with these paddles. They are definitely some of the most powerful paddles that I've utilized on the market, and I would say they're just under the levels of the Gearbox Power Pro Elongated, especially when it comes to pop. When hitting drops, dinks, resets, those slower, more controlled, more calculated strokes, you're definitely going to notice there's going to be more pop-ups than you've had with previous paddles. I had the Scorpeus 16mm as well as the Perseus 16mm. I primarily gravitated towards the Perseus 16mm mainly because the Scorpeus had a pretty underwhelming sweet spot size. I definitely felt like the Perseus was a good choice because the sweet spots, albeit were different in sizes, they weren't drastically different enough to have a negative impact on my performance using the Perseus. The Perseus obviously is going to have more power on drives and serves, but the pop as well as the control on both of these paddles are going to be very similar. And that really goes for all Gen 3 Joola paddles. They're all going to have a pretty hefty amount of pop, and they're definitely not going to be the easiest paddles to control. Now, with these Joola Gen 3 paddles, you're going to notice a tremendously different amount of power return or exit velocity that you get on these paddles. The best way that I can describe it is these Gen 3s are like using a diving board. When you jump off a diving board, the higher and harder you try to jump, the more that you're going to put weight on that diving board and the more it's going to catapult you into the air. Now, if you try to do the same thing while diving just directly off the ground, it's not going to push you back any more than the power that you are pushing back into the ground. And these Gen 3 paddles are no different. It's very much a trampoline or springboard effect, whereas the more power that you put into it, the more exponential the power becomes with the exit velocity. Now, with this propulsion core, the biggest drawback is the sweet spot. The sweet spots on these Gen 3 Joola paddles are quite poor in my opinion, and that really is just due to that extra foam that they've added into the edge perimeter of the polypropylene core. I did find it quite easy to dial in my drops as well as my drives with these Joola Gen 3 paddles. Where I did suffer pretty tremendously, honestly, is with resets as well as blocks. Now, the learning curve on these paddles is definitely going to take some time. That smaller, tighter sweet spot, tremendous amount of power and pop is definitely going to take a little bit of time of dialing in. However, I do think once you do put plenty of time into this paddle, it will be much easier to learn than the Gearbox Power Pro Elongated paddles. Now, in terms of value, I definitely would not say that these Joola Gen 3 paddles are a good value, coming in at quite a steep price of $279 before discount code. They also have potential quality control issues with their core corruption. Now, I'm sure Joola will definitely be able to allow you to send in warranty returns for any issues that you may have, but spending a lot of money on a paddle and then having it break on you within 3 weeks is definitely not something that I could say is a good value. Now, I did say quite a few negative things about this paddle, but I really did love the dwell time on these paddles and felt like they were probably my favorite paddle in terms of drives. I really felt like I was able to put my drives exactly where I wanted and was able to manipulate the ball with spin quite easily. With that being said, I do think these are probably the best Gen 3 paddles available on the market, apart from the Vatic Oni, which I have not tried yet, and I do think these are a much better option compared to the Gearbox Power Pro Elongated. I wanted to say a huge thank you to Longhorn Pickleball Co. They sent over these Joola Gen 3 paddles for me to test and review. You can actually go over to their website, fill out your email, and they will send you a discount code for the whole entire site that you can utilize for any purchase. I hope you enjoyed this video. I do think that these Joola Gen 3 paddles are a pretty fun paddle to play with, but I don't think that Gen 3 necessarily is the way to go yet. I do think there's quite a bit of room for improvement. However, I definitely think this was a step in the right direction. Until the next review, I'm Lewis with Pickleball Pursuit, and I'll see you soon.